You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 Gov.biz Radio, a CBS station.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. You're tuned to CBS radio station gov.biz 1580 AM in the Washington, D.C. area, or you're listening to us on the web, WMCLive.com, where you can also find links to podcasts of previous shows. And we want to hear from you. Call the comment line 347-903-WMC1 or tweet hashtag WMC Live. Or you can email us at womensmediacenterlive@gmail.com. Today's guests include a scholar who, with her colleagues, has written a book that just might save the world. That's no exaggeration. Also, a survivor of commercial sexual exploitation who lived to do something about it. Distinguished journalist Charlayne Hunter-Gault talks about her work, travels, and new book, and then we'll sample the sound of the phenomenal women drummers of Rwanda. Last, we'll talk with Dr. Marianne Legato about how her concept of gender-specific medicine is saving lives, female and male. But first, behind the headlines. Darkness falls earlier now, and pumpkins are ripe. Halloween is around the corner. Now the most popular holiday in the United States, to the alarm of the evangelical right, Halloween, termed All Hallows' Eve in Christianity, has a lineage more ancient than any church. It's the Wiccan New Year. Wicca means wise ones, today called witches. It's no secret that witches got a bad press, especially after 3 inquisitions over 600 years in Europe. It was the usual assault by a conqueror's religion, in this case Christianity, to 1. demonize and eradicate indigenous belief systems, 2. offer economic motive, the accuser was awarded the property of the accused, and 3. intensify misogyny, fear and hatred of the female, especially since the old religion venerated the goddess. The Inquisitions plus the Reformation tortured and killed an estimated 9 million women and girls accused of witchcraft because they followed the old religion, or were healers, midwives, rebels, or could read, or simply chose to live alone. A recent book of mine, a historical novel called The Burning Time, was based on the life of one such real 14th century woman who fought the inquisitors. In fact, a Halloween occurs in the book, called by the Wiccan name Samhain, spelled Samhain. It's one of the 8 great days on the wheel of the Wiccan year, 2 solstices, 2 equinoxes, and 4 cross-quarter days. Brigid, or Imbolc, a festival invoking the midwinter sun in February. Beltane, or May Day, the joyous spring fertility rite. Lammas, or Lunasa, the midsummer feast of the first harvest in August, and Samhain, the last reaping and observance of the old year's death and new year's birth. Samhain was a sacred time when it was thought that the veils separating realities were at their thinnest and most penetrable, veils between past, present, and future, between the living and the dead. Since the mid-20th century, we've seen a revival of nature-reverent, neo-pagan interest and practice in North America and Europe. The word pagan, by the way, derives from the word peasant, and heathen from heath-dweller. These revivals are often connected with the women's movement, which is unearthing the buried history of female rebellion. So on October 31st, pause a moment to remember the 9 million persecuted for following the old religion. Celebrate those who fought back, and try communicating through whatever veils exist between persons or issues in your own life. And have a blessed, healthy, happy New Year. Our first guest is a professor of international affairs, Valerie Hudson, who has, with her colleagues Bonnie Balfe Spanville, Mary Caprioli, and Chad Emmett, given us an earth-shaking book, literally, no hyperbole, called Sex and World Peace from Columbia University Press. It is the book that makes honest people out of what feminists have been saying for 40 years. It is the first empirical global study giving proof that the arbiter of a society, and whether it will be aggressive or peaceable, cooperative or militaristic, is not, as we've been told, economics, not industrialization, not geopolitics or natural resources or even democracy. It's how women are treated. It's violence against women. That is the ultimate arbiter. And it's done as a cross-disciplinary scholarly work, but it reads like a novel. So welcome to Women's Media Center Live, Valerie, and thank you for this book.
I'm delighted to be here, Robin. Thank you so much for your kind words.
Tell us how this book came to be written.
Well, when I was a doctoral student in security affairs and foreign policy, you could have taken every single one of my classes and never known that there were women on the planet Earth, right? And as I was a student in those classes, I thought that completely natural. As I matured and grew up, I began to notice that what was happening with women was affecting the security situation of their states. And I first dipped my toe in this water looking at the abnormal sex ratios of China and India. So with my co-author, Andrea Denboer, I wrote a book called Bare Branches, The Security Implications of Asia's Surplus Male Population, which came out in 2004 by MIT Press. And we found robust evidence that, in fact, the culling of baby girls from the population of China and India at massive levels was indeed creating, negative ramifications, not just for state security, but for regional security as well.
Wow.
Well, heartened by this, we decided, why don't we cast our gaze beyond female infanticide and look at the broad spectrum of violence against women? And it took us 10 years, but we collected just an amazing database of information on violence against women in 175 countries, every country with at least 200,000 population. And so the book that you have, Sex and World Peace, is the result of that decade of effort. And indeed, we do show very strongly that the best predictor of how peaceful a nation-state will be, how stable it is, and so forth, is not its level of democracy or level of wealth, but in fact it is the level of violence against women.
It's extraordinary. And it's a cross-disciplinary study, too, which is very exciting. It's like seeing the whole picture, because one of you is a psychologist, one of you is a geographer, and then there's, two political scientists. So it's exactly like seeing depth as well as breadth. That is amazing. Can you give us some other examples of, you talked about the culling of girls, which is due, of course, to male preference for male children, for sons in China and India. Give us some other examples of the connections.
Yeah, I see connections all over the place. For example, if you want to talk about food security for a nation state, well, you better be prepared to talk about women. If you look at who actually produces the food in most of these societies, the overwhelming majority of food is actually produced by women farmers. However, in most traditional societies, women don't have land rights, so only about 2% of arable land is held by women in the world, even though the caloric intake of children is most highly correlated with whether their mothers have rights to land or not. So that's one example, but we could talk about many others. Life expectancy and health. The greater the gender gap, that is, the more subordinated women are in society and the greater level of violence against them, the lower the life expectancy, Robin, not just for women and children, but also for men as well.
That's
dynamite. If we want to look at health, if we want to look at wealth, if we want to look at prosperity, food security, development, security, as I do, and foreign policy, I think these are all branches that come off that taproot of whether gender relations are equitable or not within a society.
And this applies to discriminatory legislation as well as to practice.
Absolutely. What we've found is you must look at law and practice in addition to other sorts of empirical indicators. So if you want to look at rape, you need to know what the laws on the books are concerning rape. What is the age of consent? What constitutes rape? Who can be a witness to a rape? And we find that in many societies, it's almost impossible to prove that you've been raped. Right,
Mm-hmm.
because
right.
of the requirements, such as for witnesses,
for male witnesses, in some
also
cases.
in practice is important. So the rape laws may look good, but then you discover that if a woman goes to the police station and reports a rape, she may be raped by the police.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
In which case, what good does the law do? So you do have to take this holistic view of what's happening with women on the ground.
And off air, you mentioned some interesting reactions that you had to the phrase, to the assumption that India, as the world's largest democracy, that you are now having trouble thinking of it as a democracy because of the status of women.
That's absolutely right. I really went through a transformation while writing this book, where I thought to myself, it's time for some good old Confucian rectification of the names. Right? That was one of Confucius's points about how society goes off track when it calls black things white and white things black and so forth. And here we've got a term democracy, right, which we understand to mean a certain kind of society, and yet we're defining it in terms such as people view India as the world's largest democracy. Well, gosh, on the basis of looking at the sex ratio in India and their culling of girls from the population, if we look at literacy of women, if we look at maternal mortality in India, all of these indicators are just terrible for women. Family law, personal status law, levels of violence against women, human trafficking. So why is it that we are even considering India a democracy? They don't even act like a democracy.
Well,
So, for example, if you took a democracy that has more equitable gender relations, such as Sweden, and you compared it with a nation like India that has democracy, perhaps procedural democracy, that has deeply inequitable relations between men and women, they don't behave anything alike. Now, there's many, many factors involved in this, but I would definitely argue that one of those factors is gender relations.
It's interesting because different societies, whether a democracy, whether under socialism, whether under communism, have argued, well, under us, women will be free, and sexism, like the state, will wither away. And yet, because they were brought to us by the same folks who brought us patriarchy, not so much women being free. So, what this book has done is really break through an entire frontier into like a new science, and it is an enormous gift. I'm
appreciative of that. And now I hope that when there's doctoral students studying security affairs and foreign policy, as I did so long ago, that now their instructors would feel it ridiculous not to mention that the security of women is integrally linked with the security of their states.
Well, I hope that's the case, and we'll do everything we can to make sure people know about it. The book is called Sex and World Peace. It's from Columbia University Press. Get it, read it, have wonderful tools for arguing. It'll change your life, and it could just save the world. Thank you for being with us on Women's Media Center Live.
Thanks so much, Robin.
We'll take a short break here while you can let us know what you're thinking on email at womensmediacenterlive@gmail.com or via Twitter, #WMC Live. I'm Robin Morgan, and this is Women's Media Center Live, the talk show with a brain. Next up, a survivor of the sex industry who lived to strike back. Verbal karate is coming up too, so don't go away. October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, but think before you pink. That's the name of a project of breast cancer action, launched in response to the growing concern about the flood of pink ribbon products and promotions. The campaign calls for more transparency and accountability by companies doing breast cancer fundraising and encourages consumers to ask questions about all those pink ribbons. Thinkbeforeyoupink.org.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 gov.biz radio, a CBS station.
And we're back. 2 weeks ago, we did a special broadcast entirely devoted to the issue of sexual slavery, the trade of sex trafficking, and the sexual exploitation industry. There was one voice missing from that we were not able to air yet at that time, but knew was coming, and we are proudly able to air it today. Rachel Lloyd, who is a survivor of commercial sexual exploitation and the industry, is the founder and the executive director of GEMS, Girls Educational and Mentoring Services. She's a remarkable activist, a lobbyist, an organizer. Welcome, Rachel, to Women's Media Center Live.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, lately, the issue of trafficking and general commercial sex exploitation, although not always combined in the minds of the public, they think they should be, but lately that's been in the news more. People are talking about it, and it seems to have made a dent in consciousness after years of so many of us toiling at the consciousness mill. What is your estimate of where the situation is now?
I think that we have come a long, long way in the last, I've been doing this work for 15 years now, and I think, we've definitely moved way past where we were at 15 years ago, or even 3 or 4 years ago. I think the level of attention in the media, I think, the political interest at this point has begun to move the needle on this issue, but I still think we have a really, really long way to go before we've really shifted kind of the public consciousness around this issue and made sure that we've created long-term systemic changes.
What about legislation?
Legislation is one piece of the puzzle. We've, in New York State, we've passed both the New York State anti-trafficking law, and then we've got the Safe Harbor Act as well, which was the bill that we were heavily involved in supporting. And 9 other states have actually passed safe harbor legislation since New York State became the first state. So that's been really encouraging. So that's 10 states now in the country that actually see this as an issue of victimization, and that children shouldn't be charged and arrested with an act of prostitution that they can't even legally consent to under the law because they can't consent to sex anyway. That said, that still leaves quite a lot of states that haven't reached there. So, but like I said, legislation is one piece of the puzzle. Legislation is important, but it's also really changing, the systems that support both the vulnerability of young people, foster care, young people being homeless and runaway, not having enough beds in cities and states, and then kind of the systems that support the industry too.
Yeah. The systems that support the industry, I don't know if we're talking about the same thing, but there's one theme, I'm sure you know, of analysis in the women's movement that links under the general rubric of commercial sexual exploitation, trafficking, what was called prostitution, the pornography industry, because women are caught in one or the other, and there's real life doesn't necessarily make those distinctions, even though sometimes the law does. Does that mesh with your experience or your analysis?
Yeah, I think there's a broad range of experiences in the commercial sex industry, and I think kind of not recognizing that can be tough for women in the sex industry. I think, though, it's important, right, while we have to recognize that there's a broad range of experiences, I think it's really critical to keep folks kind of keep it in people's minds that the overwhelming majority of women and girls in the sex industry are not there by choice, they're there by lack of choice. And whether it's because they have, you know, a pimp who's controlling them, or because of poverty, because of desperation, because of, right, homelessness, whatever those things are, drug addiction, it really isn't about choice.
It's never been about choice. It is a complete mystery. Do you have a clue as to where that comes from? The moronic notion that comes from outside, that women choose this? No little girl, it seems to me, at age 8, you know, says, gee, I want to be a hooker when I grow up. I mean, that if coercion is narrowly defined as a gun at your head, that's one thing. But economic need is a form of coercion. Poverty is a form of coercion. Addiction is a form of coercion. Where does that come from, that idea? Is it the same kind of logic that says battered women want it, the rape victim asked for it?
I think part of it is that. I mean, I think, you know, there are women in the sex industry who describe and explain their experiences differently, right? I think it's not about saying that those experiences aren't, I don't know, genuine, authentic, right? Like, I can't question somebody else's life, just like I don't expect somebody else to question my life. But again, those voices are really, while they tend to be louder, because of race and class and socioeconomic backgrounds, etc. Those kind of voices that I went in the sex industry for 2 years and it was empowering and I had a great time.
Right.
That may be your experience. I can't argue with that. But I know it's not the overwhelming truth for the vast majority of women and girls.
If it were, there would not be a higher level of PTSD in the sex industry that women suffer than suffered in combat, as I understand it.
Yeah, the violence and trauma experienced in the commercial sex industry is incredibly high. You know, there's a Canadian study that shows that women in the sex industry have one study says 40 times, one study says 130 times more likely to be murdered than their peers, even if you cut across the class and race and socioeconomic status. So, women in the sex industry are incredibly vulnerable to violence and exploitation, regardless of how you got in.
Talk a little bit about GEMS and the remarkable work you do.
I founded GEMS 14 and a half years ago now to address the overwhelming need for services for girls and young women who'd had these experiences. We started on my kitchen, started on my kitchen table, having girls stay on my couch. And now we are serving 350 girls and young women each year with a wide array of services, everything from kind of transitional housing, crisis housing, court advocacy, alternative to incarceration programming, healthcare, education, employment, strengths-based youth development. Our services are pretty comprehensive at this point. And so I'm, really proud of the work that we've been able to do.
And the book, talk about the book.
Last year, I published with HarperCollins Girls Like Us, which is my memoir of, some of my experiences in the commercial sex industry and kind of how I got in and how I got out. But more importantly, it's really the stories of the young women that I've served over the last kind of 15 years and some of those larger issues that we're talking about, race and class and poverty and how those things make a difference. And it's done pretty well and, it's, I think, been able to change some folks' minds on the issue, which was kind of the point. And as I've heard from a lot of other survivors of commercial sexual exploitation and survivors of like sexual assault, domestic violence, sexual abuse, etc., who have really connected to the book. So that's been, really powerful, I think, for me.
Well, the book can go places nothing else goes. People can, read it in the quiet of a room and have their own conversation with you, and it gives them strength, I think, probably to survive.
Yeah, and then I've definitely been really, really moved by the responses. Because ultimately it's a book of hope, right? Like it's not, you kind of, there's no surprise about what happens at the end. Obviously, like, I'm alive and I did okay. I think, helping people recognize that there really is hope at the end of some very dark journeys is really important.
Well, it's not a spoiler alert that you're alive. It's a very happy conclusion. Thank you so much, Rachel, for being with us, and I hope you'll come back and talk some more about the remarkable work you do.
I'd love to. Thank you.
Thanks again. Bye. And now it's time for Verbal Karate. The Verbal Karate chops this week are about PC. Not political correctness, but plain courtesy. This PC means trying to avoid the small insults and insensitivities that otherwise well-intentioned people let thud all the time. In previous verbal karate sessions, we've seen how wildly off the mark the word minority is, as used to describe that vast majority of the human species that's comprised of people of color. We also touched on not making adjectives into nouns, as in an illegal, which erases the individual's specificity and human dignity. So today we're expanding the PC, plain courtesy, terrain. Like chalk on a blackboard, the Bush years pronunciation kept grating at my brain. Nuclear, Iran, Iraq. The pronunciation of nuclear has nothing to do, actually, with cross-cultural sensitivity, but it happens to be correct. The pronunciation of countries' names, on the other hand, is a sensitivity issue. They are Iraq, Iran. Also, you'd think we'd know by now, since we've been at war there over 11 years, that people in Afghanistan are called Afghans. Yes, like the comfy blankets and elegant canine breed. They are not Afghanis. Afghanis are the currency. For example, an Afghan knitted an Afghan while saving Afghanis to buy a pedigreed Afghan. Okay, I know that drove you a little crazy. Look, just hang on to this. An Afghani is a coin. More items for a cross-cultural sensitivity list. We can avoid using BC and AD in dates. BC, before Christ, and AD, Anno Domini, in the year of our Lord, are Christian-centric. Instead, we can substitute the secular BCE, which stands for Before Common Era, and CE, which is short for Common Era. We can be careful about seasons, too. Specify by month, because saying in the spring blithely ignores the seasons being reversed in the southern hemisphere, where rough winds really do shake the darling buds of May in autumn. Last, we can keep an ear out for holidays. Many folks have learned to factor Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, and the winter solstice, the root of all the others, into the Christmas-centered holiday season. It'd be nice to add Islam's month of Ramadan, but that's complicated since it moves around the whole calendar year. Yet since Hinduism is the world's oldest and third largest religion, with 950 million adherents, we really ought to add Diwali, the great Hindu festival of lights that runs mid-October to mid-December. And, by the way, we should keep on using the Happy Holidays greeting that irritates unchristian behaving Christians so. Happy Holidays is inclusive and celebratory, which, after all, you'd think describes the season best. Now it's time for another pause. I'm Robin Morgan, here with Women's Media Center Live. When we return, we'll not only talk with award-winning journalist Charlayne Hunter-Gault, but also hear the women drummers of Rwanda, their sound, their fury, and their beauty. Stick around. November 6th, that's Election Day. It's about your education. It's about your health care. It's about your reproductive rights. It's about your fair and equal pay, your community, your future. People have been jailed for the right to vote. People have died for the right to vote. It's about the future of this country. Your vote counts for many things. Take control. Be a full citizen. It's your right. Vote on Election Day and help others get to the polls.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 Gov.biz Radio, a CBS station.
We're back, and our next guest is Charlayne Hunter-Gault, who is a highly distinguished TV, radio, and print journalist, and is famous and memorable to Americans as having been, as a young woman, integrated the University of Georgia, one of its first two African-American students. After a career that is so stellar it takes your breath away, she has just recently the author of a book called To the Mountaintop, My Journey Through the Civil Rights Movement, which I think is for children so that they will grow up empowered by their heritage. Where to begin? As CNN's former Johannesburg bureau chief and correspondent, she brought Africa in a way that had never been so vividly brought to Americans. As NPR's correspondent in South Africa, she did the same. She spent 20 years at PBS as a national correspondent for the NewsHour. She was the first African-American reporter for The New Yorker, and she served as the Harlem bureau chief of the New York Times. She is the recipient of so many honors, including 2 Emmy Awards and 2 Peabody Awards. And she is one of the awardees of the Common Ground Awards that will be presented November 8th at the Carnegie Institution for Science in Washington, D.C., for significant contributions toward bridging divides between people, finding solutions to seemingly intractable problems, and providing inspiration and hope in the darkest corners of the globe. Welcome, dear Charlayne Hunter-Gault, to Women's.
Thank you so much, Robin, and for that fulsome, though not necessary, introduction. It was wonderful.
Well, it's just it's only the tip of the iceberg, as you know, but still, I wanted to have some time for you to talk. Okay. Past recipients of this award have included President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf of Liberia and former President Jimmy Carter and Archbishop Desmond Tutu, and now you. And, you've spent so much time abroad, and I didn't want to ask you the usual sort of superficial questions, so I'm going out on a limb here with talk about how you see the current state globally of human rights, and specifically women's rights today, given the global women's movement and all that you've seen and heard and still are investigating.
Well, thank you for starting me off with a really tough question.
Sorry about that.
I think it depends on where you are. I think that around the world, women and organizations devoted to helping women realize their full potential are really on the road to doing just that. In South Africa, for example, Nelson Mandela's wife, Graça Machel, is working with women to empower them in the financial world. Many women in South Africa have moved toward the top of the financial world, but still a long way to go. Very few women on the stock exchange there. It just depends. I don't think that you can really generalize. And I was very amused, well, not amused so much as bemused by the reaction to an article that appeared in the Atlantic recently, and everybody was talking about women and women's rights and women's place and so forth here in America, where the struggle to achieve equality has been going on a long time. So I think it really depends, but I think there is a new consciousness. We're about to, there is just a growing sense that of that term, women hold up half the sky. And while in many countries there's still a huge struggle from, the area where this young woman was just shot in the head.
Malala in Pakistan.
Right, in Pakistan. You have extreme views there. So you go from an area like that to all the way to South Africa and then back here to America, and you just see varying degrees of consciousness about the rights of women. But I'm confident that there are many organizations as well headed by women. For example, we just saw Ellen Johnson Sirleaf and another colleague there in Liberia win the Nobel Prize. A young woman in the Middle East was part of that. And so I think that those kinds of things really do help send the message, not only to the larger community, but to the women themselves, that they are on the move. But again, you can't generalize.
No,
because
you're quite
it's different in different locations.
And certainly the war is not won here. I mean, it is. If anything, there's a war on women here going on. Let's be.
Why do you say that?
Well, the assault in the United States against reproductive rights, excuse me, and against women economically for equal pay. So much. The idea that women in the United States have it made. When the highest cause of death among young African American women is HIV/AIDS and still not recognized as such. There's a lot of work to be done at home as well.
I agree.
But I wanted to get a little bit more specific in the little time we have left. Let's talk about, because this is Women's Media Center Live, about progress for all women and for men of color in the media. You've had a long, distinguished career, and you must have a lot of scars.
Well, thank you for that. I think that African Americans, from the time that we were part of the what was initially called the summer program for minority journalists at Columbia, that then became the Maynard Center out in California, we have been very fortunate to have been able to make a way out of no way. When I worked for the summer program at Columbia right after the riots, we helped to educate 20% of the minority journalists in this country. This was in the late 60s, 68, 69, 70, and so on. But in recent years, since I've returned to this country, I've been somewhat appalled at what seems to me a regression.
Wow.
That there no longer seems to be the urgency or even the commitment to inclusiveness on the part of major media. And of course, major media are undergoing their own stresses and strains as new media enter the landscape, but it seems as if we're going a little bit backwards. And I've often commented to friends since I've been back in America from South Africa in the last few months that this is beginning to look like the post-Kerner era. And as you will remember, the Kerner Commission report talked about the reason the riots in '68 following the death of Martin Luther King was such a surprise to America was that the American media that were communicating with America didn't know what was going on in those communities because they didn't have anybody who looked like the people who were so upset about their conditions. And I'm just afraid that we may be heading for that again.
Well, hopefully, now that you're back, you see, everything will change.
I don't know about all that.
No pressure, of course.
I continue to try to do what I can to inform people in ways that they can use what I do to affect their own lives and the lives of their neighbors. And of course, their neighbors are not just the people next door anymore; they're all around the world.
That's right. You are just a gift to this country, and always have been from the time you were a young student. Thank you so much for being with us. I hope everybody will rush out and buy the book. And will you come back again?
Well, thank you. The book actually is for young readers, 9th grade and up, but I'm finding more and more adults are saying, oh, we didn't know about this. Can we buy the book? So the book is for anybody who wants to know who are the giants on whose shoulders Barack Obama has said more than once he stands.
To the Mountaintop, My Journey Through the Civil Rights Movement by the great Charlayne Hunter-Gault. Thank you again.
Thank you, Robin, and all the best.
Another recipient of the Common Good Award is a woman who founded an extraordinary group of different drummers, Rwandan women who were finding a new way out of despair. During Rwanda's 1994 attempted genocide, it's estimated that almost 800,000 people were killed in just a few months. Out of the ashes, in 2005, rose a first, an all-female drumming group called Ingoma Nshya, the new era of women's initiative. Composed of women from both sides of the conflict, Hutu and Tutsi, they are comprised of orphans and widows and also wives and children of perpetrators, and the troupe is now on its way to becoming world famous. This success is all the more extraordinary since historically women have been banned from drumming in Rwanda. Drumming, says Odile Gakire Kateze, the founder of the troupe, was done by men for male leaders. But drumming plays a large part in Rwandans' day-to-day life, used for communication and celebration, and also seen as a symbol of authority, which is why it's so significant that women are now claiming the drum. Katezi says, art is a mirror of the society, but before the genocide, theater, dance, and drumming were done just for the president. Art was not about reflecting our experience and problems, and because the arts were done mostly by men, women had no place to express themselves. Well, they are now. Many women joined the troupe just hoping to find an activity that would take their minds off the great sorrow of having seen and been through so much death, rape, violence. Soon, though, drumming became a mission. These different drummers have started a movement. Now, each month, about 100 women drum with each other, and after seeing the troupe perform, women in Congo started a drumming group. Here is a sample of the work and art of Ingoma Nshya, the women's initiative, the women drummers of Rwanda. That is the sound of survivors turning suffering into triumph. We'll take another break here. This is Women's Media Center Live, the talk show with a brain. And I'm Robin Morgan. In just a minute, we'll explore how gender-specific medicine affects you. We'll be right back. Mark your calendars. On November 13, the WMC Women's Media Awards will celebrate 5 journalists for their contributions. The recipients are Pat Mitchell, President and CEO of the Paley Center for Media, Martha Nelson, Editorial Director of Time Inc., Laura Ling, correspondent for Current TV and vice president of Vanguard Journalism Unit, Lisa Ling, host of Oprah Winfrey Network's Our America with Lisa Ling, and Sarah Hoy, all-platform journalist at CNN. To buy tickets and sponsorships to the Women's Media Awards in New York, contact mediaawards@womensmediacenter.com.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 gov.biz radio, a CBS station.
Dr. Marianne Legato is an internationally known physician, author, lecturer, and specialist in gender-specific medicine. She's the founder and director of the Partnership for Gender-Specific Medicine at Columbia University. She writes many books, including those for the lay public, starting with her publication of The Female Heart, The Truth About Women and Heart Disease, and also What Women Need to Know. And her book for the lay public on gender-specific medicine is Eve's Rib, The Groundbreaking Guide to Women's Health. That was published in 2002. There's many more books, but I want to get right to it. Welcome, Marianne, to Women's Media Center Live.
It's lovely to be here, Robin.
Well, since you are the de facto inventor or discoverer of gender-specific medicine, tell our listeners just what it is.
Gender-specific medicine refers to the fact that the normal function in men and women are different in almost every aspect, and their experiences of the same diseases are different. This is a new science, and the fantastically wide and disparate characteristics of men and women have just not been appreciated until the present time.
Well, and also I remember the infamous situation of the tests and trials over heart disease, when women were not even factored into the tests and trials, and the conventional wisdom was that, well, women didn't get heart disease much, and once women, because of the women's movement, protested and were factored in, it turned out heart disease is one of the strong killers of women, but we present differently. Isn't that so?
Yes, you do. You do present as women quite differently from men. In about 15 to 20% of cases, and this is true all over the world, women don't experience the crushing chest pain radiating down the left arm of which men complain. They, in fact, have a sensation of distress in their upper abdomen, sometimes radiating to the back. They become very short of breath and sweat profusely. Many women think they have the flu. And one of my patients famously called out for miso soup, thinking she could quiet her symptoms by having some hot soup.
But this, I mean, in other words, in the absence of this new science, gender-specific medicine, women have died because if the standard is the male physique, the male body, and male chemistry, and male ways of presenting, and if we don't match that, I mean, my God, no, our lives have been at stake.
Well, you know, it should be looked at perhaps a little differently, Robin, which is that the science of investigative or clinical medicine, in which we really looked at patients in large numbers to get data, came during and right after World War II, where veterans collected in veterans' hospitals formed the corpus, if you will, of patients who agreed to be tested, and obviously they were mostly all men. There was a desire to protect women, actually, from the trials and the dangers of research, especially the premenopausal woman who might conceive a baby during the course of a clinical trial of a new drug or an intervention, and that baby might be born deformed or worse, not born at all. So there was a genuine effort to have men take a risk and to protect women that was partially responsible for the fact that we assumed that apart from reproductive biology, men and women were identical. And since I'm on the subject, the way we found out about this was that the American Heart Association suggested that I write a book on the differences in how men and women experienced coronary disease. And the results were so astonishing that when we finished the research, I did this with Carol Coleman, a wonderful medical reporting journal, investigative reporter who was marvelous and really the inspiration in many ways for this book.
Mm-hmm.
When we finished, I turned to Carol and I said, you know what? If our hearts are this different, and women have suffered so much because of our ignorance about how different we are, we should look at other organ systems.
Wow.
And that's how this all began.
And say something about some of the other organ systems.
Well, every system in our body is different, from the way we develop in the womb to the way our organs are constructed and function. Our vulnerabilities to disease is different. And even, this is mind-blowing, Robin, the same genes, the very same DNA genes are expressed differently as a function of whether we're males or females. There are only small differences, but they are real, and they have a profound effect on function. So I found that the most interesting.
That is brain-blowing.
Of our recent discoveries.
You're right, that is brain-blowing. And this is actually quite a good discovery for men, too.
Oh, absolutely. Men have really taken all the risks. It's another way of looking at the value of men, I think, to point out that they have stepped up and volunteered almost without any questioning or worry or anxiety about it to be subjects for clinical investigation. And in many ways, they were the canary in the mine, if you will. And I think people forget how brave they were and how they consented in large groups to be subjects for clinical investigation.
No, I think that is true. I just wish they hadn't assumed that they were the generic.
Well, we owe that to the male establishment, which looked at patients and said the only difference between men and women was in the pelvis.
Yes,
I call it the bikini view, where breast cancer and pelvic pathology were for a long time the only points that people felt were different between the sexes.
Right, right. We've only got a few minutes left. How time flies when you're getting information. Talk a little bit about the foundation.
Well, the Foundation for Gender-Specific Medicine has really just given a $5 million grant to Columbia University to open the first of its kind Center for Gender-Specific Medicine at Columbia University. And this is a tremendous advance, and we expect to use the authority and the huge knowledge base and access to scholarship that Columbia represents to augment the progress that we have made, and we're very happy to have this new resource. It's very exciting.
And if people want to contribute to the research or be active in some way supporting the foundation, is there a website?
Yes, there is. The website is gendermed.org, O-R-G. And you can read about us and our organization and donate online if you're interested in helping further explore the differences between men and women. We find it very exciting. It
is very exciting because it is not abstract. It is good science, and it's absolutely central to health for the female half of the world and the male half of the world. It's as if we've been looking at the world with an eye patch over one eye.
Exactly. Well said.
And
as I said, women are making men an offer they can't refuse because new questions are coming up. For example, Robin, what makes men so vulnerable so early compared to women to coronary disease? It's not true that we don't get it.
Right.
But in general, we get a pass for almost 20 years.
And gender-specific medicine can begin to address that.
Exactly.
Wow. If a woman wants to try and find or get her doctor involved in or find a physician who knows about this, how does she go about that?
Well, she can write to us at the Foundation. We have a scientific board, and all of my colleagues at Columbia are well aware of many of these principles. We plan to actually have a certification and education plan for physicians made available through the new center at Columbia, so that will be exciting and will broaden the base of resources that people can access.
Great. That is very important.
I think so.
Thank you very much for being with us on Women's Media Center Live, and we'll keep an eye on everything you do.
Oh, thanks so much.
And now it's time for Fighting Words. An epidemic of willful ignorance is afflicting our country. I don't mean our embarrassingly low academic rankings internationally, or plain ignorance, which may not be a person's fault. I'm talking willful, the deliberate defense of and pride in ignorance. I understand why some of the boys in power promote it. An ignorant populace is easier to control. But the victims themselves who affirm it, wow. A poll done last June by Dartmouth professor Benjamin Valentino found that 64% of Republican respondents believed President Obama was born in a foreign country. Usually the country specified is Kenya. Sometimes it's Russia. Sometimes the foreign country is Hawaii. But it's not just Republicans, who cannot, after all, be blamed for everything. Nor is it simply about class or about education. 1/5 of all Americans believe Obama is a Muslim. Only 39% of Americans believe in evolution. Less than 6 months after Hurricane Katrina crushed New Orleans, 33% of Americans couldn't find Louisiana on a U.S. map. 7% of Americans think Lee Harvey Oswald assassinated Abraham Lincoln. But here's good news. 4 out of 5 Americans know that the Earth revolves around the sun. Sorry about that 5th, Copernicus. I could go on, but we'd just get depressed. The thing is, it affects all our lives. It's willful ignorance when, according to the Chicago Tribune, anti-choice Illinois Representative Joe Walsh is asked if he had actually claimed abortion is never medically necessary to save the life of the woman, and he responded, "Absolutely. With modern technology and science, there's no such exception as life of the mother. Health of the mother, same thing." It's willful ignorance when Indiana Senate candidate Richard Murdoch says pregnancies resulting from rape are what God intended. Political bigotry depends on willful ignorance, like the people certain that Obama is a Kenyan Muslim Manchurian candidate, gay socialist mama's boy who hates America and probably is behind all those crop circles, too. Willful ignorance, born of intellectual sloth, moral cowardice, and psychological paranoia, is also synonymous with denial. Holocaust denial, evolution denial, climate change denial, denial of facts, history, mathematics, science. I want to shout, why deliberately forget the little that we have managed to learn so far? And while we're enraged at the Taliban assassination attempt on 14-year-old Malala in Pakistan, dare we make the connections? Remember the searing image of 6-year-old Ruby Bridges, who in 1960 led the integration of the New Orleans school system, walking alone in her spotless starched pinafore through screaming racist mobs to school. 2 little girls, decades and generations and miles apart, risking everything to acquire knowledge. And now we have people actually boasting of being dumb, affirming the lie that stupidity equals real folks' authenticity, while learning equals snobbish artificiality? You think the escalation of violent bullying against so-called nerds, geeks, and eggheads is a coincidence? We need to ask ourselves and each other, before the dark ages descend on us all again, how did a delight in knowledge get spun as loathsome? And when was the dunce cap turned into a halo? And that's it for this week. You've been listening to us on CBS station 1580 gov.biz AM radio in Washington, D.C., and on the web at WMClive.com, where you can find podcasts of previous shows, too. Remember to email us at womensmediacenterlive@gmail.com. Portions of this program were taped earlier. Views expressed here do not represent the WMC. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. WMC President and for this program Executive Producer Julie Burton, Senior Producer Crystal Williams Chancellor, Technical Director Michelle Kinsey Bruns, Production Coordinator James Brown, and Production Assistant Nora Eakin, and our founding sponsor, Regina Kulik Scully. I'm Robin Morgan. Next week, our special pre-election coverage from Republicans, Democrats, and experts on the crucial women's vote. Have a joyful Samhain, that's Happy Halloween, And join us next Saturday, 11 a.m. here at Women's Media Center, live.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 gov.biz radio, a CBS station.